The Entrepreneur's Library, episode 99.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur's Library, the only book-centric podcast that reviews all the top-selling business books and shares authors' perspective firsthand. This is your resource to finding the next great book that will enable you to grow personally and professionally. Welcome your host, Wade Danielson.
Thank you for joining us on the EL. Today we have Mark Hatch, author of The Maker Movement Manifesto, Rules for Innovation in the New World. Welcome, Mark, and thank you for joining us on the Entrepreneur's Library.
Thanks for having a chat with me, Wade. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Will you take just a moment before we dive into your book? Will you take just a moment to introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about you personally?
Sure. A lot of people find it interesting. I'm a former Green Beret. It was quite a while ago, but actually feeds a little bit into the book. I was trained by the government on how to participate and or run a revolution. And this is something of a revolution in a sense. Got out, did a startup, went back to school, did about 8 years at Avery Dennison, a big manufacturing company, a year at Kinko's, where I ran the computer services section across the U.S., and did a variety of startups, primarily in kind of the web space, before I found the founder of Tech Shop, and have been focused on this the last 7 years.
Perfect. So now let's jump right into your book, The Maker Movement Manifesto, which was made available for purchase September 2013. And Mark, we're going to move quickly, but we're going to cover the top questions that our listener/reader wants to get answered. And the first question is, what was the inspiration behind writing The Maker Movement Manifesto?
Well, I saw early on, after I joined, that there were small companies that were launching hardware startups for the lowest cost I had seen in my career. The average member there saved something like 98% of their development cost, which fundamentally changes the access to being able to create hardware startups. And we live in a hardware world, and so a friend of mine, Chris Anderson, wrote an article called the New Industrial Revolution, or the Next Industrial Revolution. And again, that kind of inspired me because he took one angle at it, and I wanted to basically write one that would write a book that would be open, more to makers, as well as a fairly easy read for policy analysts and startup junkies and so forth.
So, Mark, what would you say, because there's so many books that come out every single month on the different topics, leadership, entrepreneurship, all these different topics, but what makes your book different from others regarding the same topic?
Well, everything I thought I knew about innovation in launching a hardware company has fundamentally changed in the last decade. And I had not seen anybody writing about the impact that was going to have on the startup world. I also saw that education had eliminated shop class from its repertoire right at this bizarre inflection point when all of a sudden the U.S. has become the cheapest place to manufacture in the world. And we're short tens of thousands of welders, and we're going to be short something like 150,000 computer numerically controlled operators. So, there's this confluence of trends that have come together literally just in the last decade that nobody had really wrapped together in a single volume. And so I felt that somebody needed to write it, and given my position in the industry, it made sense for me to do it.
So how would you have the reader, or how would you suggest the reader engage with your book? Is this one they should start at the beginning and finish all the way through, or is it one they can jump in and jump out, cherry picking information as needed?
You can do that. You can do it either way. Each of the chapters pretty much stands on its own. It is a fairly easy read in that I do a lot of stories just to back up the reality that's occurring. There's nothing like giving examples that have actually happened to convince the reader that this is real. But I have had a number of people who have, jumped on an airplane in New York, flown to LA, and consumed the entire thing in one sitting. So I'm pretty happy with it. It's a fairly engaging read, but there's no reason for you to have to set aside like 4 hours and burn through the entire thing.
Okay, excellent. So, Mark, this is my favorite part of the entire interview, and this is where I want to hand over the mic and really allow you to take a deep dive into your book and really allow this reader that's listening right now to know what they're going to get their hands on when they purchase it.
Sure thing. So I'll start with my first day at a tech shop. It was very early on. We'd only been open for a year when I ran into Jim Newton, the founder of Tech Shop. And he convinced me to come by and take a look at the place. And given my background, as I mentioned earlier, in both manufacturing and retail, I was intrigued with this new retail platform that he had developed. So a tech shop is 20,000 square feet. It's every machine tool, woodworking tool, plastic, electronics, textiles, 3D printers, laser cutters, water jet, great big open space with compressed air, electricity, wireless, power tools, big outdoor lot for working on bigger projects. I mean, this is a prototyper's dream or a hacker's dream come true. It's literally every tool you need to make anything on the planet. And it's completely open access, so you can come in, spend your $125, take a class on a particular tool so that you'll be able to operate it safely, and you're off and running. So we teach you how to use a laser cutter in 2 hours, a welding machine in 2 hours, a water jet in 2.5 to 3 hours. And what I saw at the end of that day was I had talked to 3 different entrepreneurs back to back. Each of them said they had saved 98% of their development cost. And each of them, by the way, are now worth millions based on the projects that they had been working on. And at the end of that day, I realized that I was standing in the future, as Bruce Sterling says. The future's already here. It's just not evenly distributed. Well, there was only one of these on the planet. The whole kind of hackerspace movement hadn't erupted yet. Jim was the founder, was very early in the game. And I realized that because of the potential economic impact that this would have in unleashing the creativity of the creative class, that there needed to be one of these in every single city on the planet. And so that's why I joined. But then as I moved through my experience over the first 3 years, I realized that this was having an impact in education. It was having an impact, of course, in hardware startups. There were political implications. There were big implications for even large companies as far as the way they were organized around developing new products. Then I also realized there was a gap in the current availability of books and discussion about the movement itself. And so I set about to do essentially 2 things. One is to capture the gestalt of the movement itself, because there are kind of some basic principles that we have that have emerged over the last few years that make this a particularly creative space. And then there was the need to articulate for governors and senators and presidents of universities, as well as venture capitalists and angel groups and other startups. So that was kind of the pulse of the book. And so I came up with basically 9 principles that make up the manifesto itself, and they're fairly simple. The first one is to make. Humans were designed to make. We have that opposable thumb. It's ingrained in who we are. Carl Jung talks about it. Maslow talks about it. And so just making things is a fundamental activity that humans get enjoyment out of. But one of the things that makes making whole is the ability to share it. So that's the second principle. Is once you've learned how to do something, then you need to share what it is that what you've made, kind of how you've made it. And then often there's a giving component. So you give that away. You either give the knowledge away or you give the object away. And again, that gives meaning to these objects that are completely different than what you get when you buy something off the shelf. Then there's a whole kind of lifelong learner aspect of making. Master craftsmen are still learning their craft every day. And so there's this embracement of the realization that you don't always know how to do every particular skill in order to get something done, but it doesn't scare you. You jump in and you do it anyway. And I call it tool up. You need to have access to the tools. And again, this is where our platform has driven down the cost of access to these tools by at least 2 orders of magnitude. And you get them on a monthly basis instead of having to buy a welding machine. You just come in and use ours. There's a play principle as well. A lot of the best projects turn into the best projects because somebody comes at the the tool or the material or the project from a different angle, coming at it from like a sense of wonder. And then there are some really important things around participation that I'm seeing emerge in a collaborative community where it's a lot more fun and actually effective to work in a space that has 20, 30, 50, 100 other people working away on their projects rather than doing it in your garage. It turns out your project gets upgraded almost every time, and then you have an opportunity to help other people upgrade their projects. And so this whole idea of participating in a broader community and activity is core to the movement at large. And then the last two are support and change. And support is essentially this is a call to action, and why I call it a manifesto is that this platform and this new way of working and this new access to these kinds of tools is creating an environment where we can, in fact, do innovation and change the world at price points that we've never seen before. Again, for like $1,000 or $3,000, you can get to your first prototype, where those used to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so encouraging other people to participate in the movement through supporting the movement itself, through doing mini maker fairs, through sending this book around or other books in the space like David Lang's Zero to Maker or Chris Anderson's book, The New Industrial Revolution. And then the last piece is to change. And really, when you embrace this activity of making, it will change you in positive ways. And it's important to embrace that and then encourage other people to change as well. And again, that changing component is partially why we call it a manifesto and why we call this thing a movement, is we are anticipating and expecting a significant portion of the population to change their consumer behavior, to change the behavior around gift giving, and to change their attitudes around trade skills and manufacturing, and even shop class back in the high schools. So that's a pretty good cut at it. There again, two heartbeats. One is the kind of the fundamental economic impact that's having, and then the other one is kind of a personal impact that the movement is having. It's contained all in that book.
So you just did a great job of breaking it down and letting us know what the book's all about. And this next question is going to take it a step further, and that we really want to know, if the reader could only take away one concept, principle, or action item out of your entire book, what would you want that to be?
You no longer have to be a professional to change the world. And that is a kind of a radical concept. So everything that we've learned in the last 15 years on the software side, where you can fairly quickly learn like Ruby on Rails, which is a software programming language, or Java or HTML, and launch a successful software company for, in 90 days for less than $25,000. This is what the accelerators are doing. Well, that same kind of ability and capability is now winding its way through the physical universe, which is much larger fundamentally than the online universe is. And again, I've got proof points throughout the book where, David Lang came in, didn't know how to make anything, and 6 months later owned a robot company. We've had electrical engineers create the world's most efficient data cooling center system that Emerson Electronics licensed. And these guys, they were electrical engineers, but they didn't have any mechanical engineering background. Picked up the skills that they needed in a few months, were able to build their prototype and launch their company. And so we are fundamentally operating in an entirely new world. Now, again, it's not evenly distributed yet, but it is coming to your city soon. And the opportunity then to turn your idea into a physical prototype is easier now than it's ever been. It's almost to the point where if you can imagine it, you can make it.
That's fantastic. Mark, do you have a favorite quote from your book? Either one that you personally like, or maybe one that's resonated with your audience thus far?
Well, early on, it was kind of weird. I started tweeting because of this platform, essentially. But I was sitting at my desk, and a guy was walking down the hall, and he was very excited, talking to one of our dream consultants, and he said, I'm really glad I'm here. I can't believe you guys exist, et cetera. And the dream consultant says, well, why are you so excited? And he says, well, man, like, where else am I going to go to be able to work on and store for a really reasonable price my lunar lander? Holy cow. Yeah, indeed. Where are you going to work on your lunar lander?
Wow. That's awesome. So what are some, this is getting off topic a little bit, but obviously you get to see a lot of different kinds of people come in. What are some of the things, without obviously giving away, exactly what they're doing, but
Sure.
what are some of the awesome projects that you've seen roll through?
Well, the world's fastest electric motorcycle, Lightning Motors, did 218 miles an hour on the Bonneville Salt Flats a couple summers ago. They just won Pikes Peak, destroying the super bike. By 19 seconds. When was the last time you saw a professional race where the second place finisher came in 19 seconds later?
Yeah.
This guy had a massage and a brew by the time the Ducati came across the finish line. I mentioned the world's most efficient data cooling center, the world's cheapest drip irrigation system, the world's first nitrogen detection system that figures out how much fertilizer is in the ground before you fertilize, reducing the size of the runoff zone at the end of the Mississippi while reducing costs for farmers. We've had this company called BioLite that's launched a camp stove that also charges your electronics, which is actually a big deal in countries where they have rolling brownouts and you can't always count on electricity. Probably my favorite, though, is Jane Chen's company. She and her team came up with this incubation blanket that was designed to help save babies' lives through activities at the Stanford D School. And, at the end of when you graduate from college, you no longer have access to the tools at the university. And so they came in and used our tools to upgrade it. And the magic was they interacted with other members in our community. And the core technology was upgraded by 900% just in a period of a couple of months. And this blanket has already saved 87,000 babies.
Oh my gosh!
And they did all the design and development work for a few $1,000s. They're in their 20s. You got to have the prototype in order to be able to raise the money, to be able to create the momentum, and you got to get to that prototype for as little cost as possible. And then probably our most famous one is Square. The little white,
yes,
usually on iPhones.
I have one.
James McKelvey was the guy behind that. He knew Jack Dorsey from some work they had done before, came up with the idea. Actually, and James was a glass blower for the last decade. That's what he's been doing. He owns this amazing glass studio in St. Louis. And they came to the Valley, pitched their project, and the 10 smartest investors in the world turned them down. Then James came to our Menlo Park facility, built the prototypes. They went back out, and instead of doing a PowerPoint, they just took $50 off each of these guys. It's the first time I've ever heard a startup charging a VC for the privilege of getting the presentation. And then they raised $10 million in their Series A. I think they're worth like $6 billion now. And my punchline there is, if Jack Dorsey of now Square fame, but before that he was Twitter fame, blogger fame. If Jack Dorsey can't raise money without a prototype, how do we expect our university professors in their tech transfer offices? How do we expect our managers inside of our large corporations to be able to get through the new product development process without a prototype?
Yeah, that's a huge point.
Yeah, and the answer is they can't. Without the prototype, they can't. Actually, usually the first gate in the stage-gated new product development process is the prototyping phase, because it runs $500,000 to $1 million, or it used to. Now it's like $2 or $3 grand, maybe $5,000. I counsel anybody that will talk to me. It's like, eliminate the first gate. If you're having a meeting about these prototypes, you're wasting money. The meeting's costing you more than the prototype will. And again, that's new to the world.
Yeah, that's powerful. So literally, these things you just talked about are changing the world, and you guys are helping do it. So that's powerful. And it leads into our next question as well, which is, we're really looking for a book recommendation from you that's a paradigm shifter. That's a book that impacted you in huge ways that you could suggest to our listener/reader.
Well, the Peter Drucker's book on innovation and entrepreneurship has been speaking to me for decades. I took the class from him at Claremont Graduate School, and he really outlines how it's done and where innovation comes from. And again, relative to this book, things have changed. What used to cost so much doesn't cost as much anymore. And I think, again, my second favorite in the space right now is David Lang's book, Zero to Maker, because it chronicles how quickly he was able to go through the process of not being able to make anything really good other than, he will self-identify. He was like, Mark, the best thing I've ever done is written a really good email. And then literally within the year, he owned an underwater robot company that he had helped design the robot for. That is life-changing for a lot of folks. So it's a great read.
Absolutely. So Mark, before we depart, can you recommend the best way for our listener to get more information on you and your book, The Maker Movement Manifesto?
Well, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. They can hit my website, markrhatch.com, or hit the Tech Shop website, go to the press page, and under the press page, there are all kinds of great video links. Bloomberg, Forbes, Inc., and others have done video outtakes of Tech Shop and the platform.
Perfect. Well, Mark, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your book with us. This has been a very fascinating and eye-opening interview.
Thank you, Wade. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks again for listening in today. If you'd like more information on Mark or his book, The Maker Movement Manifesto, check out the show notes at theelpodcast.com.
Looking for your next book idea? Head over to theelpodcast.com, where Wade shares his amazing resource, the top 10 business books recommended by over 500 entrepreneurs, with you for free. That's theelpodcast.com. Till the next time, keep it on the EL.